You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
So we're a couple of minutes late starting because I felt it was important before we got into talking about today's books that I got a song stuck in Jay and Sean's heads. And I couldn't decide what song to pick to get stuck in their heads. So I decided that the song needed to be from a band whose name was as weird as their music, which gets to be very specific in the case of a band called Wang Chung. So we are late because we were listening to Dance All Days by Wang Chung. This is In Stores This Week, where we talk about comic books that are in stores this week. But I would much rather talk about how do you name your band Wang Chung? I could see, you know, Sean naming his car that, but not necessarily naming your band that. I don't know. We'll see. We've got a lot of books to talk about this week. And Ship, now it's stuck in your head, buddy. Now you're hearing Dance All Days by Wang Chung stuck in your head. Apropos of nothing. It's the greatest gift I can give. This is In Stores This Week, where we talk about new books that are in stores this week, which we should probably do. But I don't have Dan giving me a weird look like, why are you still talking? Because Dan is sick and not here. And so I'm just going to ramble until I decide to click this button. That is correct, Ed.
Yeah.
Everybody Wang Chung tonight. I need some time because now I've got to listen to Wang Chung in my head and get that unstuck. So, welcome in Sean, who is not a schmuck this week. He will return to being a schmuck in a weekend or two when he goes back to work and can't be here anymore. But until then, he's here and we love him.
Yep. And then in 7 days, I'm back to being a punk.
Yep. Yep. It's a whole thing. You guys do comic reviews at weekends? I
think it means on weekends.
I don't know what that means. What you're asking, the Netta. But we're gonna get into it this week, where we talk about new comics that are in stores this week, and we're gonna start with 007 for King and Country. I guess I'll start with what is happening.
Awesome things.
Why is this book so twisty-turny?
So good.
It's so good. God.
Like, I had to read this one 3 times today. Because, like, I had to keep going. Now, who was that guy? And what was that guy doing? And why was they over? Look, Daniel Warren Johnson has woven this story so deep and in so many different directions that if they don't at some point, make this a movie, what are they even doing?
Mm-hmm.
Facts.
I mean, you've already got the name, James Bond for King and Country. There it is, right there.
And the theme, the very slow song sung by Adele, could be "God Save the Queen."
Mm-hmm.
You know, Adele could just do a cover of The Clash, and I'd be in for it.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, this is easily the best thing Dynamite has going and has had going since they started this original run back last year.
That isn't Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, you're wrong, but okay.
I'm right, and I don't care.
You're wrong, because Darkwing Duck exists.
Fight me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Launchpad McQuack!
On every page.
Yeah. Seriously though, this is one of the best comics going. I can't get enough of it. I honestly wish that I could have this every week, but I understand that you can only write so fast and draw so much. So we have to wait and get this every few weeks. I'm telling you, people, if you haven't read this, you have to. This literally reads like a movie. You could probably take the entire script starting from the first volume and make this a movie right now, and it would do well. As long as it's still Daniel Craig playing it.
No.
Yes.
No.
Best James Bond ever.
Man.
No, Dan is going to play James Bond.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. I thought he was playing what is
He's
it?
got
Armstrong.
range.
I thought he was playing Armstrong.
He's got range. He's playing them both.
That'll work. I can do that.
Nice. So, not even close. This continues to crush it for me. You would think by now it would get boring or stale, but no. This one consistently delivers on the spy thriller action. The art is still on point. The story is just rock solid, and at this point in the series, I don't even think I trust Bond right now. I don't know who to trust in this book. Like it's that well written. Like it's so well crafted that even if you just watch the movies, like I've never read a James Bond book. You'll still enjoy this. Like this was one of my favorite books this week.
Yeah, no. I will say this, and ship's going Sean Connery. This is not Sean Connery Bond.
No.
I don't know that anybody who's played Bond could play this Bond. I think you're going to have to find someone young but old at the same time.
That makes sense.
You know, it's a weird kind of line you're going to draw. But I don't know that anybody can do it. Vin Diesel can play James Bond, but then they'd have to take out 2/3 of the emotions.
You're clipping a little bit, Kyle.
Better now?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I mean, Bond is so hard to play, and I'm not sure people realize that like those earlier Bonds aren't quite how he was written in the books.
It's true. All right, Vampirella versus the Superpowers, number 3.
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay. We don't need any other Vampirella for a while. This continues to be one of my favorite Vampirella stories that we've read. The art, the story, just everything about this book is like I whined and I whined about the vamp. This to me is better than the vamp because it was more than one issue. The ending of this one, I was just like, what? I can't wait for the next one. I think these books do best when there's not 6 other Vampirella titles going on. Or if there are 6 other Vampirellas going on, we're not reading them all within like a week of each other. It feels like we've only really read this one the last couple of weeks as far as Vampirella does. I say keep this one going for as long as you can. As long as the quality stays there, keep this one up. Love this one.
So, I will preface this with I haven't read issues 1 and 2, and that's okay. Because this is written well enough that you can come into it and get an idea of what's happened in the previous issues. And I'm inclined to agree with Jay. This is probably the best Vampirella story I've read since The Vamp. For whatever reason, Vampirella just kind of works when used in this capacity compared to most of the other stories. And I like it. She just fits for whatever reason. 1948, don't know why, but it works for me. Love the art. Just a really good story. Cannot wait to read issue 4.
Did anybody else's picture of Sean freeze mid sniff?
Just a
Okay,
little.
it was a great. I should have grabbed a screenshot. Anyway, I'm like, why aren't his lips moving? Okay, so here's the deal with Vampirella for me, and I think this is true of a lot of comic companies. They have something be a little bit successful, and then they start taking it super serious. And I think Dynamite has done that with Vampirella and Red Sonja and some of these characters, which is why we get 30 different books from them. When all of a sudden they don't take it super serious is when the good work happens. And that's what this is. This is just fun Vampirella. This is what the character can be if instead of trying to make her like your company's tentpole brand, you just let her be the weird vampire alien lady who barely wears any clothes, and you put her up against some of the most absurd characters you can work with in the superpowers. You know, these are characters that are public domain for a reason, and Dynamite uses them extraordinarily well here. So I think the problem that other books suffer from that this one doesn't is the we're super serial, man, kind of thought process. And this is just fun. And it is. This is a great issue that's just fun. I don't give a crap about Vampirella as a character. I give even less of a crap about the superpowers. But somehow you put them together and it's weird, like dark, violent Archie, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Pathfinder Wake the Dead #2. Sean, you want to go first?
Sure. Hold on. I'm trying to find my first note on this here because I'm trying to remember what I thought.
This is why you don't take notes. If you don't take notes, you don't have to look for them.
So this one for me was a bit of wasn't sure what was happening. I didn't read issue 1, so this was kind of my first jump into Pathfinder. That said, it was all right. I mean, it was a decent book for me. Wasn't a love or hate kind of thing. The art was great. I loved how it was drawn. But it was, I guess, hard for me to follow, not having read issue 1 and maybe not understanding what this universe really is, I guess. That said, it's not a terrible book by any means. If this is definitely your jam, it's worth the read for sure. I mean, the one character on the cover is probably the most well drawn in the book for whatever reason. She just seemed like she was drawn better than everybody else. But yeah, I guess having a better understanding of what Pathfinder actually is would probably have helped me enjoy this a little more than I did.
Well, see, here's the thing, because here's what I got. I did read the first issue, and it took me a little while to realize that this was the same story, the same characters that I read in that first issue. Like, it's so weirdly, it almost feels like the first issue was self-contained, but you can tell we're carrying on from the first issue. I don't really know how to explain it. It feels very, very different from the first issue. So it was kind of so-so to me. The Bard and the Dwarf are still two of my favorite characters, but the Necromancer kind of stole the show for me. I really liked her. I dug the art, but again, the story, I don't know. I felt the first issue was stronger. I thought the ending battle was cool, though. I would still read issue 3 of this to see if the story picks up. But outside of that, this one was kind of dropped off from the first issue. That's all I got on this one.
So Fred Van Lente and I are very different game masters. That's the thing that this is apparent to me. This is the second issue here is essentially the second installment in a campaign that Fred would be running, is how he's trying to write this. So this feels a lot like an actual Pathfinder game when you're actually, in a campaign in Pathfinder. It does have the ability to have vastly different play experiences session to session, depending on how your GM chooses to run it and that kind of thing. Fred is not making the choices that I would make, but that's what makes these games playable, right? Everybody makes their own decision. And so seeing how he sees these characters interacting in these settings is a interesting and fun way to consume Pathfinder. this is not the best RPG based comic coming out these days. There are a couple of better Dungeons and Dragons stories out there, I think, right now. But Fred Van Lente has a very interesting method of storytelling in the Pathfinder universe that I'm interested to see how it keeps going. It just feels it feels, this one to me feels like when you've killed the character your GM was counting on to be around for a while, and so they're stalling. So, like I said, we'll see how it goes, but it's a weird fit right now. All right. I'll go first on this next one. Disney Villains Scar. Still doesn't feel like it's got anything to do with Scar or The Lion King or any of the IP you would expect it to be connected to. Just feels like it's a story that vaguely happens in Africa. In the same universe where maybe there was a Disney musical.
Ah,
That's funny, Ed. But yeah, this doesn't, where even the gargoyles that I've been unimpressed with still has the gargoyles tone, and Maleficent certainly has the tone of Maleficent, and Darkwing Duck certainly feels like Darkwing Duck. This doesn't have the tone that any of the other properties do. It doesn't sound like the right property. It just kind of sounds like, here's this thing with these licensed characters, and it feels disconnected and incomplete. And it's a real bummer because this had a lot of potential in issue 1 and 2. It just doesn't feel like it's living up to them in issues 3 and 4.
see, I'm kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum. I thought it was if this is the end of it, I thought it was a pretty fitting end. And I'm glad we read this one. I enjoyed how, as the kids would say, seeing the sausage get made. Because
I don't think any kid's going to say that. I think old people say that, which is why I say it.
Oh, okay. But anyway, it was, to me, it was cool seeing Scar's plan come together. Like, because this is set before he pulls off his big coup. I liked seeing that. I thought it was, I thought it was impressive. Younger me probably would have been like, that's so evil. Older me's like, not bad. Not bad. That's a smart plan. But for me, this, just like the last book, I don't have a ton to say about this. I thought it was a fun read, and I'm not mad at it.
So I'm going to kind of fall somewhere in between the two of you on this one, where partly because of the fact that this was the first issue of Scar that I've read, that I've had a chance to read, but this particular issue felt more like it was about the hyenas than it was Scar himself, minus the little dream that he was having at the beginning of the book. And that was fine because at least it made a little more sense as to how the hyenas, or why they are the way they are. The art was gorgeous. This book is really nice to look at. I will definitely say that for it. But yeah, it felt less about Scar in this issue, more about everything else around him. Probably because, like Jay said, the plan is finally kind of coming together, so you're seeing all the pieces. So I didn't love it, but it was definitely a pretty solid read. I don't know if this is the end of it or if there's another issue coming out, but it was a fun read. Ed, for me, the few pages that he had with Zazu was hilarious. So yeah, Ed, you made the book, just so you know. You're on the cover and you made it in the book. So good job.
All right. There you go. I guess, have any of you guys read any of the Rivers of London stuff prior to this?
Nope.
Okay. So this should be fun.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I honestly, I almost thought this was another Godzilla book, just because the title reminded me of that pirate one we read. But no, it's dragons and other things. I don't quite know what to make of this one, to be completely honest, because it shows you apparently there is a ton of these books. They're all Rivers of London, and then they have the subtitle of whatever they're going to talk about, whatever the book's about. Uh, the art was kind of all over the place to me. There were certain spots that looked really good, other spots not so good. Uh, I don't know. I don't know if these things are supposed to connect or what's going on. Like, it's easy enough to follow on its own, but it kind of makes me feel, well, if there's so many of these, maybe other ones will give me a little more information on what's going on with this one, or it could just be completely standalone. Don't know. It's the first one I've ever read.
So, from what I gathered, reading the kind of the bit before where they were showing you all the books, it does say that most of the stories themselves are self-contained. That said, I think if we had read other stuff, we might understand who at least one of the main characters is. This book was a little convoluted, not because of the fact that I hadn't read anything, but it definitely seemed like at first they weren't quite sure with what kind of story they wanted to tell. At least until they got in the helicopter. And then that seemed to finally clear up a little bit of everything. It would have been nice to know that the main character has powers or knows magic. That was kind of one of those things like, oh, that's why you're in this special division of the police. So that would have been probably something nice to know from the beginning. But it's not bad. I agree with Jay. The art is a little janky and inconsistent. But then again, so is the story. So that kind of is my thoughts on the book overall. It's just a bit inconsistent. Hopefully, issue 2 takes it in a direction and we can actually just know what's going on with it.
So anything that says Ben Aronovich at the top is connected. So all the Rivers of London books, and there's several others in this world that he has created. If I told you that the Rivers of London books are Doctor Who meets the X-Files meets Hellboy, would that help you a little bit in terms of understanding what this is?
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is that's what this is. It's or you could maybe even throw in a little bit of supernatural, right? This is the main characters in this book are what Hellboy or the Winchesters are in other universes. Is the person who deals with stuff in almost a Doctor Whovian sort of style where it's I'm the protector, I'm that guy. And so this is more of that. Instead of in the past they've had like rat infestations, like characters like Ratcatcher. They've had other sort of mythological creatures like banshees and other things, and this one is dragons. They're all kind of in that detective noir style that Dan loves so much. Pulpy detective noir. And so if you're into that, it's for you. And it's a big, long series. There's like 30 books. It's huge. But they're super fun and they're easy to get, and they're consistent in terms of being kind of the same style of stories. The art does have a tendency to get all over the place. Ben Aronovich is kind of in that James Patterson sort of world where he's not always the person writing it, but he's the person with the idea, and then somebody he works with writes it. Kind of. So sometimes the writing can be a little different in terms of quality and context, but overall it's one big universe overseen by one guy. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. If it's something you're into, it'll be for you. If it's not, you might like it because you like dragons or something, but it's not going to pull you in. My favorite one though was the rats, because it legit made my skin crawl. It was that creepy. It was great.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This is Grim Fairy Tales number 74. 22 pages of content.
Which was 20 pages too much.
Well, I never thought I would say you gypped me out of 10 pages. But I'm going to say not enough pages, only because maybe in those last 10 pages they could have got their crap together.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This book had potential. The problem is, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, the art was so wonky, it took me out of this book.
I just want to say, I think that's a product of a bad PDF.
That was my first thing on here. I asked.
I think the document we got was not rendered properly, so the art was unclear.
Super dark.
It wouldn't even so much. That might have been probably what it was for me, because the people looked just bad, and then the monsters and everything looked okay, and then you had the pages in the in between realm. Those looked good, but if it wasn't rendered properly, then that definitely explains a lot of it. Story wise, I truly had no idea what was going on. Like I sat there halfway through the book and I'm like, wait a minute, how did she get knocked out and brought into this little in-between world with the guy, and she's talking to him, and then all of a sudden she's back in her body awake, and we're in the middle of the fight that's been happening in between those scenes. It was just one of those, I really genuinely was not sure what was going on and how we came to where the book actually ended at. Which is a shame, because it's got a few of my favorite characters in it. I'm a big Red Agent fan. Love that character. So it was kind of sad for me that this book was a little all over the place. And then, like Kyle said, if the PDF didn't render well, then that definitely took away from the experience for me. So I mean, I hope if anybody gets the physical copy of this, that it's better for you, at least visually, because it had potential. Maybe somebody will get it, and whereas I didn't. But for me, it was just one of those, I wasn't really sure story-wise what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, so for sure the PDF is blurry. It's like they output it at too low of a resolution or something. That said, why are there Doctor Who bad guys in this? Why are the silence and those things that happen when you change timeline, time banshees or whatever, in this book? They've never been in Grim Fairy Tales before. I would have preferred fish people, because at least they would have been in universe. This was weird. It wound up being a pretty decent action book in terms of the story had good movement. There were some decent action scenes, some cool looking bad guys, but like this book starts nowhere and ends nowhere and doesn't go anywhere in the middle. Like, that's why I say 22 pages of content. Maybe if they would have had 10 more pages to figure it out, they would have been able to get to something. But it feels like they don't know what to do with an ongoing, because they don't do ongoings over there at Zenescope anymore. And because of that, they've forgotten how to do this. And that's a real shame, because this book had everything going for it. It really did. They just couldn't put it all together.
Well, since my first thing got answered, hello to everybody in the chat.
What's going on?
Everybody flying by.
Dan Price, the man, the myth, the legend, writer of Bigfoot Knows Karate.
Yep. This was fine. It was super short, which I really liked. I personally, though, am just not a fan of this storyline, and there just wasn't anything in this issue to change my mind about what they're doing with this. Um, I usually lean more towards the actual tales and the stories that had maybe three characters max, like the Van Helsing one we just read. Really dug that one. Uh, you know, I'm not gonna bash the book at all. Like I said, it's fine. I don't want anybody who's excited to read this to like don't let my opinion on any of these Zenescope books, sway you. I always want people to check out stuff that I dig and stuff that I don't. You know, just because it's not something I'm into doesn't mean that you wouldn't be into it. This one just is not for me. I miss the tales.
All right. The Seasons Have Teeth, number 4. I have never understood what's happening in this book. I doubt I ever will. I don't. Did it end? Did it not?
Jay had a very good theory about this book when we were kind of talking about it earlier. Now I'll let him share it, but I haven't read any of this. So that said, my takeaway is the same as yours, Kyle. What really is this about? I don't really see much of a story here. I see a lot of really good looking art. The book is really nicely drawn, especially winter when you finally get to see that. That was so well drawn. But yeah, I have no clue what this is supposed to be, what it's supposed to be about, what this guy's purpose is. But yeah, I'm just going to let Jay share his theory because honestly, that's about the closest working thing that might actually be what's going on here. So take it away, Jay.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. If you decide to go back and read the first couple of issues, there's going to be, in my opinion, a very personal thing to you that kind of tells you what his motivations are in this. But just like Dan, I know he's not here, but Dan and I have both, for whatever reason, have enjoyed this book. If this is truly the end of it, it's very ambiguous as to what happens. I've said for a couple of issues now that I think this was just the main character's unalive myself mission. I think that he's trying to get these pictures to pay some kind of what I call a soul toll. He knows he's done something despicable, and this is his way of trying to atone for it, is kind of what it feels like to me. To be honest with y'all, I think this is one of those draw your own conclusion type of books. Like, if this is the final issue, you're going to have to do that. Because to me, it's just so open-ended that I couldn't tell you how it ends. It's so open-ended. I enjoyed this one, though. I enjoyed it.
I'm guessing the personal thing you're referring to is his wife's battle with cancer that they alluded to.
Did you read? Okay.
Yeah, I got that when they talked about that part of the book, so I get what you're talking about there.
I need a story to end. I've read 4 issues of this book and I don't know what it's about. Maybe I'm missing some trauma that you need to have to understand it. Or maybe I'm just dense. Both of these things have been said to be true about me. There's something about this book that just feels like either editorial chopped out something important or Dan Waters was purposefully vague to the point of not making sense. Something is amiss. And if it wasn't for the art of Sebastian Cabral, I would have 2 issues in, told Dan and Jay, you guys can keep reading it, but I'm not even going to talk about it on the show.
That's fair.
This art is the reason to give this book hope. And for me, that's the only reason I'm going to go back through and reread all 4 issues like in one sitting to try to figure it out. The art is so good, it doesn't deserve to have a story that doesn't end. That doesn't make any sense. So I want to try and make sense for myself of that. And so we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, this winds up being a very personal story for the main character about achieving something that they feel like they need to achieve, but you don't in any way feel like you need to achieve it with them. And there's a disconnect in that. So,
like, do any of the other seasons show up in the previous issues?
Yeah. Every issue is a different season.
Ah, okay.
All right. So before we go on, because I know Jay is just itching to talk about Berserker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jay just itching.
Yeah.
What's happening in Triangle of Truth and in other places where you might find yourselves on the internet?
So yesterday, we finally dropped that rapid review, doing it in a new format, although new to our channel, not new to us. We basically are adopting what happens here. We decided to do more books and be a lot less spoilery in how we talk about them. We didn't want to ruin the book for people. We wanted to just interest you enough to come in so that you read it and make your own conclusions. So that dropped yesterday. We did 4 books on it. Seemed to get a pretty good reception. Jay has more boxes that he is yet to touch. So that'll be coming whenever he's able to get around to it. I am thinking about doing a video talking about like a playlist, like what you listen to when you're reading, if you're one of those people that does it. I know Kyle's big on talking about soundtracks and stuff you might either listen to while you're reading, or I hear this song in my head for this book. I'm a big, like, for instance, I'm a big instrumental person. I don't like words in my music while I'm reading, because then I find that I'll start reading and all of a sudden a line from the song jumps in and that's not the dialogue. So I figure I might explore that one here just to see what people think of it and what kind of music people listen to. But yeah, mainly unboxings and vague ideas of videos or what's going to happen. I'm setting up, because as good as the rapid review did, I'm going to try another one in those formats, season probably some of what we've read here. I've got to talk about 007. And now that with the next book coming up, Berserker, I've got to talk about that, because that was my first time reading anything in that universe, and it's awesome.
So next Monday's Devil's Advocates is Comic Book Mythbusters Part 2.
Yes.
All right.
We're going to bust some more comic book myths. There's a couple that we really need to get to that we haven't, which will be super fun. And then I'm hoping next week tonight, this show, Dan's show, the next show, somewhere in that realm, we're going to be announcing some new content coming your way here on the EXP in the form of things you'll be able to watch earlier on in the day.
Nice. Super
So
excited.
there's that.
But I've loved what you and Bronze Age are doing, dude. Like, that is easily one of my favorite hour and a half of the week.
Yeah, we're having a good time. To get some of this new content, though, I had to go eat a lot of pancakes. So hopefully it's worth the years off of my life that the syrup took, because there was a lot of syrup. Once the restaurant ran out of bacon, it's just like, I guess bring me more pancakes. All right. So Jay made us promise to let him talk about this first, but I'm going to keep talking just long enough to make him really start itching, like I'm going to talk about the book. But I'm not actually going to talk about the book. I'm just going to talk long enough to make Jay uncomfortable. Crocheting with Wickline is canceled until Dan is feeling better.
That's true.
He's a little under the weather. That's why he's not here with us. But, there's a book on the screen that Jay really wants to talk about, but I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet. So would someone bring me a Mountain Dew while Jay talks about Berserker?
Yes. All the yes that I can yes. I love the first series, and I'm already on board with this. Just the art, the action, the brutality. Oh my god, I love this book so much. There's a hidden joke in here too. It's when we first meet a king. There's a hidden joke in here. I hope if any of you pick this up and read it, please let me know if you caught the joke, or I think Sean caught it. Just let me know if you caught it, or if I'm just reading too much into something. I love this being set in the past, and learning more about Keanu. I mean, Unute, however you say his name. If you've never read Berserker, first of all, I highly suggest you do. First series is amazing. But if you don't, you can start right here. It pretty much explains what's going on with him, vaguely, of course. But it's extremely new reader friendly, I think. Even though there's something in this book that I'm usually not particularly fond of, the way that it's used serves a purpose and makes sense in the story. And it's not something that's going to be dragged on for further issues, I feel. For me, this one barely, and I mean just barely, beats out 007. Just by the tiniest bit, because those were both great books. This one is my pick this week. This is so good. So good.
We've talked about on this show before that I believe I'm in that camp that every comic should be able to be somebody's first comic. Not fish people, the fish person.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't read a single issue of Berserker, the first volume. Didn't matter. And in fact, probably better off that I didn't. Because it lets this, which is a prequel, be a prequel. Like, I don't already know stuff that I would not have had known were I in this time. Like, God, that sentence just made my brain twitch. Anyway, Steve Scrosey, who is co-writing this with Keanu and is also the artist, did a fantabulous job. There were some shots where, like, you could see through the main character that I'm like, I don't need that much cartoony gore at 10:30 in the morning when I'm reading this book, which is when I was reading this book today.
But yes, you do.
I don't. I'm good with just leave it in shadow. I understand what I'm supposed to know. But I loved this. I don't know that I would go back and reread the first volume because of this. But this was super fun, super interesting. I don't remember the scene where Cthulhu killed his dog, but apparently he did because of what he did to Cthulhu. So take that for what you will. This was super dope.
So I, like Kyle, have not read any Berserker up until this point. But unlike Kyle, I am 100% convinced to go back and read it. This book was awesome. So good. I did catch Jay's joke, and then as I'm thinking about thinking about what I remember from the book, there's another part that for me was a bit of a Deadpool reference, and it's when Deadpool's ripped in half by Juggernaut. He's like, "Where's my legs?" There's a bit of that in here, and I laughed a little bit at that scene. If you just want utter violence and epic pages, this book has that in spades. I mean, there's not a boring part about it. They give you action right at the beginning, a little bit of story, and they jump into like an epic half book long fight, and it's awesome. You have to read this if you are a fan of action. Ed, the best thing I can tell you is it's more like John Wolverine versus Cthulhu. That's literally what the two characters are. It's so good. Anybody who is a fan of Keanu and all of his action films, you're gonna really, really, really dig this story, and it's so beautifully drawn, including the epic fish person.
I said this hasn't convinced me to go back and reread the first volume. It has convinced me to watch the anime they're making out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
Like the aesthetics have convinced me of that. Going back and rereading the first volume, I may or may not do, just because if there's going to be a third set of books, I don't want to read the end before I read the middle.
Yeah.
Like I gotta wait until they're done making Berserker to know when I can read what I can read, because I will read it all. But yeah, no, this was fantastic. I think the notes though that they were giving to the colorist Dave Stewart was more red.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's man,
So much red.
it's so good though.
All right.
So now there's two things stuck in my head. Wang Chung and I'm gonna rip you in half now.
I thought maybe it was simply red. Alice Never After #1, which is a sequel to Alice Ever After, which was a miniseries that happened from Dan Panosian last year.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get out of the way, y'all, real quick. I am not a big fan of the Alice universe, never have been. This book did little to draw me in more to it. The story for me was honestly, I had no idea what was going on. It had no direction to it. That said, the one plus side is it's gorgeous art. Like what you see on the cover is very similar to what you get in the book. So that's about the only plus I can actually give for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that, and I'm going to get out of the way and let y'all hopefully talk good about it.
Not knowing the point of Wonderland is exactly knowing the point of Wonderland.
It's true.
Okay, so now that answers a question that I had, because I was like, yeah, this is a continuation. I don't remember reading the end of the first.
We didn't. You and Dan disliked it so much I had to read it on my own.
It's not so much that I disliked it. It was just this one is not drug fueled and overly depressing. That's what this one has going for it for me. The other one, I felt bad about myself after reading. This one, I thought it was fine. We spend a lot of this issue in Wonderland, and yes, I don't care if it's really called Underland. It's Wonderland to me, so it's always going to be Wonderland. I don't care, just like it's Namor. There's still a certain sadness to this. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but it feels sad. Maybe it's the way the art's done, which it is beautiful art. But it leaves me with so many questions. I'm still like, what's real and what's not with this book? I know that this part of the book is supposed to be real and this is the dream, but there's still part of me that's like, are we sure? There's something about the way that it's written. I don't know. For me, I would give this the official hashtag not that bad.
So Sergio Spalletta, sorry, did the art on Alice Ever After and is doing the art on this one as well. The thing you learn in Alice Ever After is that Wonderland, or in this case Underland, because I think there's a copyright issue, is Alice's way of dealing with the psychosis that comes from drug addiction. You find out in the first book or the first series that Alice is someone with a drug addiction in Victorian England, in Victorian times. They didn't treat the things like this particularly well back then. So she was put in a situation where she was enduring incredible amount of pain at the hands of the people who are supposed to be helping her. And so that Wonderland, or Underland, this place, was a place she created in a drug-fueled state to cope with her reality. People who exist in Underland are people who exist in real life, but she's made them into characters that she can deal with in a better way. Now you're past that. These people have been caught. Alice is dealing with the fallout, but she's experiencing a complete and utter psychotic break. She has lost most of her touch with reality and has slipped into this other world in a more permanent state because of the trauma.
Now this entire series makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
like literally, that helps.
Yeah. No, I know. It's why this is my favorite book of the week. It's why Berserk came in second, and 007 came in fourth, and this is a really good look at the pain that comes from being misunderstood and of being maybe not as supported as you would like to be or you need to be. If you're easily triggered by that kind of stuff, stay away. It speaks to me in a way that I understand why it doesn't speak to other people. So this is a great story, and it's Alice following the White Rabbit, and knowing what the analogies are there make it very interesting. So just know that you definitely need to have read the first volume to get the second volume. But if you have, this is really issue 6 instead of issue 1. So
okay. Now I have to go back and reread everything because you literally just put that book in a whole new light for me to understand what's going on.
Right. So you see in this book, and we're running out of time, so I gotta go fast. You see her parents are there going, how do we help her? How do we help her? And she's not there.
Yeah.
She is psychotic break. And then her parents go off, and she's aware that they're having affairs and they're doing these other things that you find out about in this book. But she doesn't know how to frame that anymore. So,
okay.
Star Wars hyperspace stories. It's Greedo. And he hadn't been shot in the face yet. This book was hysterical to me. I told Dan yesterday I didn't want to read it because, why are we reading a number 6 on this show? But I'm glad we did because it was a great Jabba the Hutt Greedo story. Very funny in places.
Yeah, I like this one. Greedo has always been this, one-off character that Han shot in technically the first Star Wars movie. And I didn't know much after that. I get to some folks, it's like, why? But I'm like, why not? I think this is a good issue for people who are familiar with Star Wars, but don't have Dan or Jim Beard's knowledge of Star Wars, or Kyle's. Because I know Kyle's the bigger Star Wars fan, correct?
Yeah, but Dan and Jim could run circles around me in terms of their Star Wars knowledge.
True. Art was solid, and the story was well written. I really enjoyed this one.
My initial reaction was didn't like it. And then I got to let it marinate in my head, and it became funnier the more I thought about it. The sad part is I had no idea this was the dude that Han blew away until y'all just said something. Even though I remember that scene vividly, there's a pop in this house that illustrates that scene. Didn't realize that that's who this was. But that said, it's a nice little side story within the Star Wars universe, which I'm not that knowledgeable on. I'm a Star Trek guy. I'll say that now. Definitely worth to pick up. I don't know if the other 5 stories are connecting on this or if they're all kind of standalone. So you'll have to let me know. But if you're a Star Wars fan, definitely check it out. It's well drawn, good story, definitely worth a read.
All right. Well, that's it for in stores this week. Remember, guys, for us here at The Experience, it's super important that you go into your local comic shop. Doesn't matter who your local comic shop is, go into your local comic shop. Find something that interests you and pick it up and have a good read. If you don't know where your local comic shop is, head over to comicshoplocator.com, type in the zip code of the area where you are, and it will tell you where there are comic shops nearby to you. I was traveling this past weekend and I used it, and there were no comic shops within 40 minutes of me. It was rough.
That's brutal.
So I had to drive 40 minutes to go to a comic shop. I was sad. I loved the shop, but I was sad that I had to drive 40 minutes to get there. So find comic shops nearby to you and go to them on the regular. I will be right back in just a couple minutes. I don't know if Jay is joining me this week or not, or if Sean is joining. I don't know what that deal is. But I will be back in just a few minutes on Minute to Skim It with Miss Jen. And we will talk to everybody next week on In Stores this week.